thank you all once again for joining us tonight. We really appreciate having you here to participate in tonight's event. Normally, we would be having this event at the center, but given the circumstances, we are holding this virtual event for you all in order to talk a little bit about Jennifer's book and hear from Wilson about his reactions to the book. So during this health crisis, the center quickly responded to moving all of their programs and services online. You know, we had on March 13th, we were told that we were going to be working from home and the center was going to be closed indefinitely. So it took us a while to transition all those programs and services, such as our recovery programming, our youth services, our drop-in programming, our substance abuse programming, and any of our arts and culture programs, such as the Second Tuesday lecture series. So now we're happy to say that 100% of all of our programs and services have moved online. They've resumed, including the mental health counseling, substance abuse recovery services for adults and young people, HIV services, youth counseling groups, support groups, and groups for LGBTQ immigrants and the TGNC community member. At the same time, we've also added a number of additional groups, including bilingual groups in Spanish to help address the community's needs during this time. And we've also launched a virtual help desk where people can use the live chat feature that we just launched in order to get resources that they might be needed or might be needed at this time. And that's available 7 days a week for anyone that's interested in that. So while we continue to bring programming like tonight's event for you for free, if any of you are able or available to do so, we do kindly ask that you consider making a donation to the center, and I'll put the link inside the chat feature so you can take a look. But it's essentially gaycenter.org/respond2020 in order to help continue bringing these kinds of programs to you, to the public, free of charge, but also expand that reach to audiences that are in need of those services. So I thank you all for being here. I thank Wilson for being here. I thank Jennifer, and I definitely thank Howard for all the work that you've done for, you know, helping make Second Tuesday what it's become. So I look forward to tonight's talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and welcome to the Second Tuesday lecture series, which is the longest running event at the center. So over the past 30 years, the Second Tuesday lecture series has presented over 300 authors, politicians, artists, performers, religious leaders, athletes, musicians, in informal lectures, discussions, readings. Probably most famously in March 1987, Larry Kramer's appearance at a Second Tuesday was the founding of ACTA. My name is Howard Williams, like Richard said, and I'm the volunteer coordinator for the Second Tuesday series. This is our first virtual Second Tuesday, and I'm thrilled to have two such exciting people on board. Like Richard said, I hope you're members of the center, but if you're not, at least also when you go to gaycenter.org, look for the link that says sign up for the newsletter, and you can put your name in there and be reminded about things every couple of weeks about exciting lectures like this and other things that are going on at the center. Since this is the Second Tuesday lecture series, we do have another presentation coming up in June. We have author and journalist George M. Johnson, who's the author of the new memoir manifesto, All Boys Aren't Blue. In a series of personal essays, George M. Johnson explores his childhood, adolescence, and college years in New Jersey and Virginia. From the memories of getting his teeth kicked out by bullies at age 5, to flea marketing with his loving grandmother, to his first sexual relationships, this memoir weaves together the trials and triumphs faced by Black queer boys. Tonight, you know who we're talking to. I confess I was a little hesitant when I started to read Good Boy, My Life in 7 Dogs. Probably 15 years ago, we had, 15 years ago, I read Jennifer's breakthrough novel, She's Not There, A Life in Two Genders, which was wise and funny and absolutely eye-opening. Then a couple of years ago, I read her novel, The Long Black Veil, which was mysterious and very moving. So I knew about her life and I knew about her sort of perfect writing style. And I knew, but I wasn't sure what to expect from this memoir. When I was in junior high school and high school, I had a St. Bernard, Fearless, and that was like a monumental fact for me. Growing up, learning how to take care of the dog was very important. And then a few years ago in Second Tuesday, we had Mark Doty read at a Second Tuesday, He just won the National Book Award for Poetry, but his new memoir was Dog Years, which was full of both hope and some very sad things. I didn't want to recall losing my St. Bernard Fearless again, but I shouldn't have worried because Good Boy is absolutely charming and humorous and full of great stories. And while the full life of the dog is noticed, it's the music and the emotional center and the stories and the singing and the celebrations that really make it interesting, all the overlapping events and passions. And then our other speaker tonight, I've never had anything but positive, fabulous thoughts about Wilson Cruz. He was our breakout gay character on that one wonderful season of My So-Called Life. Now I sort of think of him as an old friend as Hugh Colbert on Star Trek Discovery. Just so that you know the full story, Jennifer Finney Boylan is the Anna Quindlen Writer-in-Residence at Barnard College, and she writes the bi-weekly op-ed in the New York Times that we always look forward to reading. She served on the board of directors of GLAAD, and she was also a consultant on the TV series Transparent and I Am Kate. She lives in New York City and Belgrade Lakes, Maine, with her wife Dee Dee, who you may have seen earlier, her son Sean, and her daughter Z. Wilson Cruz continues to impress and amaze me. He's a proudly out African-American, Afro-Puerto Rican gay man and has served as an advocate for gay youth, especially gay youth of color, for a number of years now. I'd like to very warmly welcome Jennifer Finney Boylan and Wilson Cruz.
Hey, thanks, Howard. Thanks, Richard. And thanks, everybody at the center. We're so grateful for what you do. And hi, Wilson.
Hi, darling. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How nice to see you.
Good to see you. For those who don't know, Jenny and I go way back because when she was on the board of GLAAD, I was a staff member at GLAAD. So she was my boss. And together we maneuvered through many a trial and tribulation, I should say.
Well, I would say that the time that we worked together at GLAAD was a kind of a crucial moment, both for that organization and in many ways for the LGBTQ movement itself. I'm not sure I knew what I was getting into when I took on the job of board member and then later as board chair. But
either of us, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, so at the time there'd never been. Somebody's got a mute there.
Oh, no, the host has unmuted all participants.
Hi there. If you want to, Richard, if you want to go and mute everybody except for Wilson and me at that moment. Anyway, I think no. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Okay.
Yeah. Technology.
I'm going to try one more time. It was the first time a transgender woman or a transgender anybody had been the board chair at GLAAD, and it was barely the first time a trans person had been on the board of any of these organizations.
And it was also a time when we, as an organization, really committed to expanding our work and advocacy for trans characters on television and film and media. It was really an expansion, a real push to do more. And we're starting to see the product of that now.
This is like 2014. Yeah. So
2012, sorry.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so Wilson was part of GLAAD then, and neither of us are actually officially affiliated with GLAAD anymore. But during that time, Wilson and I think, I don't know, I always felt like we had a special relationship, a special friendship. A few late nights with you and me and young Omar Sharif Jr.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. I felt like, I mean, if it was going to happen, it was going to happen then, and we were going to do it. And GLAAD was, really hovering on the edge of irrelevancy and insolvency. And it was like, well, either we're going to just pull the plug on this thing, or else we're going to come back stronger than ever.
Go big or go home.
And fortunately, Sarah Kate Ellis became part of GLAAD, and now they're they're doing great work, and I'm so proud of them. I mean, Sarah Kate is the one who's done so much of the work to reinvent that organization.
Amen.
But anyway, GLAAD notwithstanding, I understand you've had a few acting gigs, Wilson.
Yes, as soon as I put my career on hold to join GLAAD for those 2 years because there wasn't a whole lot going on for me, and I felt like there was the only way I was going to start to get the kind of work that I really wanted in this industry was to advocate for better representation and more diverse representation. And so I was like, well, if it doesn't exist, let's go ahead and make those things possible so that I could work. It was very much in my own self-interest. But yeah, so I started working pretty quickly right after I went into Red Band Society when I left GLAAD, and then I went into 13 Reasons Why, and now Star Trek Discovery. So it's been quite a ride since.
Well, Wilson, for those of you who don't go back as far back as some of us, as you may not know, Wilson has been time and time again the visual face of gay queer life on stage. The original Angel
in Los Angeles, but I went to do Broadway. Yes,
in LA.
Yeah.
And of course Ricky in My So-Called Life, and now of course Star Trek, Dr. Goldberg. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to be public as an LGBTQ, I don't want to say icon because, it'll go to your head, but, kind of like icon. And Star Trek in particular, what was it like to queer that franchise? I know everybody wants to hear you talk about that.
Gosh, that's a big question. I think the answer really is that you can't take the artist outside of the time in which they live, right? It's all, you have to take into account the times in which they live and what message they're trying to put out and what their art says about that time. And I feel like I made a decision pretty early on in my career that I wanted to use whatever talent and abilities that I'd been graced with to help tell the stories of LGBTQ people. And so I wanted to tell better stories and more complete stories about who we are. And it started really early with My So-Called Life, and that kind of set the bar. And then after that, it was like, well, what else can I do and how else can I illuminate our experience? And so Rent was a huge part of that. And in terms of Star Trek Discovery, it was more than about time that after 52 years that the franchise had a real set of regular characters that reflected the LGBTQ community. And so Anthony Rapp and I really understood the weight of that and took it seriously. And the best part of that duo, of this pairing, is that because we had a 22-year relationship as friends, that we were very quickly created a relationship just based out of our real friendship. And so it was very easy to fall in love with Anthony Rapp, and it still is.
Yeah.
And then recently I for the last 7 years, I've been executive producer on the documentary series Visible out on television, which was kind of my baby, because it was a way for me to really talk about the history of the movement, but to tell it through how we were depicted on television, from the early inception of television through current day. So it is my offering to the community and to the larger community as a whole, so that they really understand what our struggle has been.
Wilson, as a public figure, as a face for as a queer actor, and also as a person that people turn to, people look to, do you ever feel that you have to be on extra good behavior? Do you feel like you have to be? I remember when I came out as trans and I started being on TV shows and stuff, an older transgender woman took me aside, and she didn't quite yell at me, but she essentially said, "You have to be Jackie Robinson. You have to be beyond reproach. You have to, watch what comes out of your mouth. You have to do your homework, and you have to be you know, you really have to you know, make a good impression, because we're only going to get one shot at this. Well, of course, we got lots of shots at this.
Right.
And it kind of, it rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, because I was like, well, I can be pretty good, but I'm not sure I can be that good.
Well,
it's not fun to be.
I think it's a lot more pressure on people who are the first to put their foot through the door, right? It's harder on the firsts. And I think that's what your friend was probably getting at is, you know, there isn't a whole lot of information before the first person comes out and, you know, tells their story. And so people look to that person as, you know, as an example for the rest of the community. But I learned pretty early on that there was more power in being authentic, and that authenticity and honesty about my own experience only made my story more universal and invited more people in to listen. And so I didn't try to be anything more than I was, because I thought what I was real and it was honest. And I also was able to speak to the experience of many people who I knew were going through very similar things. So I didn't try to be perfect. I just tried to be honest. And that was my goal.
Have you gotten, I presume you've gotten blowback from some more conservative or less accepting members of the Star Trek world, and how do you deal with that?
I breathe a lot. Look, I mean, anytime you do something controversial or something that's unexpected or outside of the realm of normal for people, there's going to be pushback. But, you know, Star Trek, the franchise itself, has always been about infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And if nothing else, if Star Trek had never invited a LGBTQ couple of any sort, it would have failed miserably in its mission of talking about this idealized future that we are all working towards. Because in that ideal, we are all equal and we are all loved, and we are all seen for who we actually are and celebrated for our differences. And so for me, I very, as angry as sometimes I got with some people, I knew that at the core of this franchise and its fandom were people who really understood that. And they outweighed any of the negativity by far.
That's so cool. Wilson, it's wonderful to hear you talk about your experience and all the work that you've done. If you're just joining us, I'm Jenny Boylan. I'm in conversation here with Wilson Cruz, and we are talking about Star Trek. We're talking about dogs, and the occasion for the conversation is my new book, which is called Good Boy. I'll hold it up for a second just to let you see the cover. And it's a book about dogs, which we'll talk about in a second. We're also celebrating the work of the Center in New York City, the LGBTQ Center, which for more than 3 decades now has been saving people's lives and been a great amplifier for queer voices of all kinds. And their work continues now. Their website, which is gaycenter.org, right? Has lots of resources, so please check that out. Wilson, I want to. We'll get back to Star Trek. We're also going to take questions from people who are on the call.
I want to talk about the book.
Yeah, well, let's talk about dogs, man. So
I have to say, you know, we're friends, and we've been together, you know, for a long time.
Yeah.
But I feel like I know you better right now. I feel like.
Is that right?
I feel like even though this book, you say this book is about your dogs, this book is about you. It's about you and your capacity to love and be loved. And you use the books, or you use the dogs to tell us more about yourself, but also about the people in your life. I feel like I know the people in your life better now as well, your family especially. But can I read to you my favorite part of the book?
Oh, okay.
It's my favorite part because it sets up the whole book really beautifully, and it tells people exactly what the book is about. You say, everything I know about love, I learned from dogs. From Playboy, that's the name of a dog, by the way. From Playboy, I learned that it is perfectly fine if everyone hates you as long as you are deeply loved by one person. And that sometimes what we are loved for is not our gifts, but our curses. From Penny, I learned that sometimes love fades, that it can be hard to keep a promise at one age that you made when you were younger. I learned the terrible truth that as we morph from self to self over time, the love that oneself has sworn can seem unfathomable to another. From Matt the Mutt, I learned that sometimes the happiest people are the ones that cause the most pain to everyone around them. And from Brown, I learned that sometimes those who appear the most normal are the ones who are craziest. I love that.
Yeah.
So much. And then and I swear I'm not going to read the whole book, but there's just one more thing I have to read because it's so true. Where is it?
That book is full of true things. It's hard to nail one down.
Oh, I know where it is. I know where it is. I know where it is. Here it is. And then we'll talk about it. But I've been drawn to dogs above all, perhaps because my own personality is fundamentally canine. I am happiest when I am with those whom I love, preferably by a warm fire. If you lost something, I would try to bring it back to you. If you and I were ever to part, I would be grief-stricken. If we were to meet again, I would be overjoyed and stunned. I never thought I'd see you again. I can't believe you're back. This is fantastic. The saddest moment of any day is the moment my wife turns her light off on her side of the bed and I feel crushed. The day is over. There is no more fun to be had. It's all finished. This is when Deidre just smiles and says, we'll do more things together tomorrow, Jenny. There are many more days for us ahead. I lay my head down on my pillow, unconvinced. I never want this life to be over. I want to live forever and spend each day making sure you understand the depth of the love I have for you. I sleep with one eye open, just in case anything comes creeping for us as we dream.
Wow.
There's more to me about you than about your dogs.
It sounds better when you read it, Wilson. I wish we hadn't already done the audiobook because I just got an idea.
I would in a minute, but
yeah.
I just love that you've used the dogs as a device to let us in more on about who you are and what your experience has been, and that these dogs served as a confidant for you for so many years when you didn't have anyone else.
Well, first off, that's adorable, and thank you. I'm humbled by all that all those sweet words.
Well, they're true.
The reason I wanted to write about dogs is not because I think dogs themselves are interesting per se, or at least more interesting than cats or hamsters or hedgehogs. But although they are, but the thing that interests me about dogs is that it's impossible to talk about dogs without talking about love. And we are, as a species, we're not that good at talking about love. We all know that if we're, and now I'm going to sound like a preacher. I have to channel my inner little Richard.
Do it.
If we're here for any one reason, we are here to love each other. And
you say that in the book.
Yeah, but if we talk about, to even talk about love means that people start rolling their eyes, people get uncomfortable, and not all men, but a lot of men in particular, I would say, have a hard time expressing love and using those words, except when suddenly they're in the presence of a dog. And my father was very much like this. My father was a fairly, he wasn't shy exactly, but it was certainly not emotive. And yet he would get down on the floor and wrestle with that dog. And just, when I would see him, the only times I ever saw him cry that I remember was when a dog died, or when we were watching a movie about a dog dying. So there's this weird way in which dogs and talking about dogs open us up to talking about love. And that's why I wanted to write about it, because, you know, I didn't want to write just one of these books about, you know, my wonderful 4-footed friend Fluffy. You know, I mean, in fact, I know a bunch of writers who, there's a phrase, going dog book. Jenny Boylan, she went total dog book, you know, which means that you've kind of gone for the
sap.
Yeah, you've gone for the easy. Like when I got my job as a columnist at the New York Times, the one thing that the editor told me, the only rule, don't write the dead dog column, okay? Well, I think I've now written the dead dog column 3 times. But you have to write about something other than this kind of the sappy sadness. And what I love is the ability to talk about love. And dogs are, at least my dogs, you know, they're problematic. So I had one dog that, you know, would.
Yeah, I didn't walk away from this book wanting a dog, by the way.
Yeah. Well, so I had a dog that, Playboy, in fact, my father's dog, that, you know, would chase after motorcycles and kind of bit people.
A terror.
Yeah. I had another dog, my dog Penny, also known as Sausage, who just became this sad, bloated, kind of disgusting kind of Jabba the Hutt thing. And that the cooler I got, the uncooler my dog got to be. I had a dog named Matt the Mutt that essentially would, pardon the expression, fuck anything. And was most in love with my grandmother's leg.
I'm sorry, I have to stop you. There is a passage in the book where you describe a party that your mom is having or something, having people over, and
yeah,
they come in the back door without following her instructions of knocking first. And that whole passage, I literally was crying. I was laughing so hard.
Well, this was, and everybody knows a family that has a dog like this. It's the dog, it was never well trained. It would, if the doorbell rang, it would knock people over. It would bark at you. It would pee anywhere it wanted. And Matt was never house trained. And above all, he just wanted to fuck your leg. And the only person who thought it was fine was my grandmother, who, you know, was a character in and of herself. And I remember there's one scene where I came into the living room. There's my grandmother, like, drinking vodka with the one hand, and the dogs, meanwhile, just you know, working away at her leg, and she's shouting, you know, he's got more spunk than your grandpa. So that's what I like. The idea is when we talk about dogs, we're talking about love, but we're also talking about how complicated love is and how bad we all are at expressing that love.
You said it beautifully in the book when you said, it was never the love the dogs gave me that mattered. It was the love that I could give them, especially during the years of my life when I could not figure out how to express the gnarled up passions of my own heart.
Hey, I'll hold up the book again. We're talking about Good Boy, which is my new memoir. It's called My Life in Seven Dogs, and it's freshly pooped out by Celadon, which is a division of Macmillan. You can find it both on Amazon.com, of course, and if you go to IndieBound, that's INDIE Bound, you can buy it from your local independent bookstore and help keep your independent bookstores around. I mean, one book isn't going to keep the lights on, but it's a start. So anyway, hey, Wilson, I want to ask you, what about your dogs? Have you had dogs in your life? Let's hear about it.
I have.
And why no dogs on Star Trek? That's what I'd like to know.
That's a good question.
Dogs in space.
Huh.
I mean, triples is one thing.
I do have a meeting with them in about an hour, so I'll bring it up.
Picard had a cat, didn't he?
No, he had a dog.
Captain Picard? Not that he had a cat.
On the new series, he has a dog.
I'm looking to the Trekkies, pardon the expression, Trekkers, in the yeah, people are nodding.
He has a dog on the new series, Picard.
You know, okay.
Number 1.
Okay. Oh, of course. You know, no. I'm not talking about Picard. Don't get me started on Picard. Okay.
Oh wait, who did you say? Who were you talking about?
I mean, in the Next Generation, didn't he have a
Oh
cat?
yeah, no, they didn't have. They had a cat. He had a cat. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Wait, okay, wait, I'm looking to the Trekkers. They're thinking it over. No one. They're all saying no. They're saying no, no cat. I could swear.
No?
It just if you're drinking Earl Grey, you've got a cat, don't you? Isn't that just? I'm just hallucinating it. Okay. Anyway, Wilson, tell us about your dogs.
Oh, so it's funny. What makes me laugh is because there's a moment in the book where you talk where you figure out what your drag name is, and and I literally had to close the book because that's so hard.
Well, I didn't invent that, of course, but that's
No, I know. So mine would have been Honey Montrose would have been my drag name.
It's the name of your first pet is the first name, and the road you grew, the name of the road you grew up on, and mine was Playboy Sawmill. Now that's not a porn name, Playboy Sawmill. I don't know.
Mine is Honey Montrose, and I always think that she had like a Southern accent.
Yes, of course she would. Yeah.
No, I'm Honey Montrose.
So what kind of dog?
We had Honey when I was a kid. We had Cocker Spaniels growing up. So Honey was a Cocker Spaniel, and then we had Whitey. I don't know why we ended up on Whitey, but basically it was a black Cocker Spaniel that had one little white patch under its chin. It was lovely. But they all lived outside because my mom didn't grow up with dogs, and so she always had the dogs out in the yard. Now they have their own Cocker Spaniel. They're older and they get along better with dogs, and the dog gets to live in the house. But as an adult, I had a pug. Who I loved.
Yes, of course.
And I lost him in the divorce, but he was with me for 4 years before he moved to Brazil. But anyway, his name was Muñeco, but we called him Moon because he had a moon face. And Muñeco
nice.
means doll, and he looked like a little doll. So yes, I am a big dog person for sure.
So it sounds like you're leaning towards more like the small, the medium-sized dogs rather than the big honking dogs.
Yeah, I'm not I don't think I would go bigger than a cocker. Like the next dog that I have, I want a Shiba Inu.
What kind of dog?
A Shiba Inu.
Shiba, I don't know what that is.
Japanese dog. It looks like a little fox, I guess. And my best friend had one, and they're so stuck up. I love them for that. They're just like they're like cats. They cannot be bothered. And so his dog was named Scout, and Scout would come up to me, and she would walk up to him, she'd go, and then she would just walk away.
That's very cat-like. I tell the story in Good Boy, now available in hardcover and in also as an audiobook from Celadon. Sorry. I tell the story in the book. Sorry, I just had a little passing phase there. Of a cat that we owned, and the cat's name was, and my sister named the cat. My sister had a thing. She still does, actually, but this cat's name was Baboing.
Yes.
What? What was the cat's name? I said the cat's name was Baboing. And so one morning, as I was about to board the school bus ran over Baboing. So that was bad, and I had to get on the bus. We drove off. My mother, meanwhile, scooped the cat up in her arms and raced off to the vet. I don't think Baboing survived until she got to the veterinary hospital. But when she did, she walked in there with Baboing in her arms, and she explained the situation to the receptionist, and the receptionist said, "Yes, Mrs. Boylan. Okay, now please tell me, what is the cat's name?" And my little mother, standing there with the dead cat in her arms, had to look at the receptionist right in the eyes and say, the name of this cat was Baboing. So there you have it. Yeah, I'm down to one dog now. We have a dog named Chloe, who is an adopted dog. And we went, I mean, I guess circling back to Good Boy, again, the thing about dogs, it's, yes, on the one hand, dogs teach you everything about love. but they also teach you everything about loss, because the thing about dogs, unlike human beings, is that they're not immortal. If you have a dog...
Do you know something I don't?
Yeah, unfortunately, you and I both know the same thing.
Yeah.
But dogs, I mean, if you're lucky, how long do you have a dog? A dozen years, if
Yeah.
it's a big dog.
Just why it's been hard for me to have pets. Like the thought of losing them so quickly, it's heartbreaking to me. I don't deal well with death.
Yeah, well, and to have a dog means that you're going to love something that you're going to lose, which of course, don't tell anyone. Shh, but that in fact is like, it's kind of like being human also, actually. I think it's, wait, now I will prove that I am a college professor. I believe it's Shakespeare's Sonnet 73 that concludes with the couplet, "This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well, which thou must leave ere long."
Mm.
You never thought that you'd hear Shakespeare and Baboing in the same conversation, but there it is. I think there's a certain kind of love that you know won't last forever. And I think, I mean, humans have that relationship, couples have that relationship, both among the queer and the straight communities, I guess. But the thing about a dog is that it's not a relationship that's going to last forever. And then after you've lost your dog, at least if you're like me, you're in the situation where you do one of these. I'm never having another dog. That's it. I'm done. I never want another dog except for Old Yeller. And how long does that last? I mean, some people really have, this is, I had a dog. I had the one dog and I'm done. But a lot of people, it's like, well, you have the dog and then, well, and in our case, along came Chloe when we lost our dog Indigo. And I said, well, you know what? I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to hurt that much again. And then someone told me there was this dog that needed a home, and I said no. And then one day I stopped off at it's called the Bed and Biscuit. I stopped in, and there was the dog, and I said, well, maybe I could just take her home for the weekend. And the people at the Bed and Biscuit were like, yeah, just take her home just for the weekend. Well, of course, she's still here. And at the end of that first day, the dog got into the bed and she looked at me and she said, I would stay with you if you wanted. The way they do. And
I love the voices, the individual voices you gave each dog. Like the
talking dogs, yeah.
Yes, the talking dog. And they only talk to you. But the personalities you gave them, like who was the one that you said just wanted to be back with the pigs? Is that Chloe?
Oh, Lucy. No, Lucy. She hated us. That dog, she hated us. She was raised in a pig farm, and all she wanted was to get back there. I have her saying a lot of stuff in this book, and most of it's disapproving.
Yes. But she was, with you through some of the most important parts of your transition, right?
When I came down the stairs for the first time in heels, Lucy looked at me, and for a second she was like, and then she kind of took a better look, and she was like, oh, it's only you. Okay, we're good. Hey, Wilson, we should probably go to people's questions.
Yeah,
or we could talk about dogs for another hour, which would be good.
No, let's do the questions. People are far more interesting than I am.
Howard and Richard, do you want to coordinate the questions, or should we just take questions off of the
chat?
The chat. What do you want to do?
I filtered some of the questions. One question was for Wilson, and someone asked, when do you think there'll be a trans character on Star Trek or Discovery? To start.
Yes. I know somebody who could do it too.
We're going to deal with the issue at some point.
Okay, Don, are you writing that down? Don is not only a friend, but also a reporter.
I think it makes sense for Star Trek to tackle gender issues, and I'll leave it at that.
Well done. And so diplomatic too. It's incredible.
Well, I don't get fired.
Although, can I just say, although, and I know this isn't trans, but if you go back to the original series, there was that wonderful show in season 3, which is not the best of the original series, when Kirk's body gets taken over by, is it Janet? What's her name? Janet something. Trekkers, give me a nod if you remember what I'm talking about. Okay, am I the only person here who's over 60? Anyway, it happened, and so there's a woman who she wants to become a captain, and she can't become a captain. I don't think it's because she's a woman. I think it's because she's crazy. Anyway, she takes over Captain Kirk's body, and she walks around for this whole. I mean, it's wonderful because so William Shatner has to perform this whole hour of television, acting as if he's got this woman inside him who's pretending to be Captain Kirk. And it's this wonderful thing where he's like, you know, Mr. Sulu, won't you? I said go faster. Mr. Sulu, why aren't you going faster? I asked you twice now, please. Oh, please. Mr. Spock.
It actually reminds me of an episode where Spock is taken over by an individual from another species, and he gives this an amazing monologue about about how humanity and the experience of humanity is such a lonely experience, and that in the end, that's that we're so alone. But he has this beautiful monologue. I wish I could remember exactly where episode it was, but it reminds me of that. There's a lot of taking over of bodies on Star Trek.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think it's one of the things that speculative fiction and science fiction movies and shows.
I mean, we even had it on our series too, because in season 1, Shazad played a character who was
right.
So yeah, there's a lot of that going around.
Jenny, someone asked, are you still in touch with Caitlyn Jenner?
I am in touch with Caitlyn Jenner less than I was. I used to be. I would call her. Well, after the show ended, after we had our two years, and then after the show ended, I would stay in touch just every 6 weeks. Caitlyn is someone who I still want the best for her. She was really maddening, both on screen and off, because I really wanted her. I don't know. Maybe I wanted her to be someone that she can never really be. Or I wanted her to be a more progressive version of herself. But I tried to be a good friend to her, and Wilson can vouch for this. When you have a friendship with people who also are actors who have a public life, and when they get themselves into trouble, and you agree with the public, then you're in this funny situation where you're torn between a kind of a thing that you believe and a goal you want to achieve, and yet your friendship with the person that you know. And my relationship with Caitlyn was always that I was the person who would tell her the shit that nobody else would tell her. Like, no one really cares if you've gotten your hair done that day. Actually, you could have slept in an extra hour. The last time I talked to Kate was on Valentine's Day. I just called her on Valentine's Day and wished her well. And I think she's kind of settling into herself. So I'm in touch with Kate a little bit. I know she's always got a new idea for some new project. I think she's got something that she's about to unveil. But I'm in New York and Maine. She's high on an undisclosed location in Malibu. So I just don't see her. I promised her the next time I would go to California, she said she would fly me around, and she bought like a little plane. She said she would fly me around on her little plane.
I bought a bike and she bought a plane. Okay.
Well, So.
Melody has a question. Let's unmute Melody and see if she can ask her question.
Hi, Melody, are you there?
Hi, I am here. Actually, Jenny, there was also another episode of TNG called The Outcast that had this race of people that were like, didn't have any gender, but there was this one person who felt like they did have a gender. And of course, then came on to Riker because, you know, Riker was a dog and was always coming on to people. So. And my question is actually the first one that was asked, because it actually wasn't quite the way I wanted to ask it, which is that TNG, a lot of Star Trek episodes have, of course, dealt with transgender people in one-off episodes. But what I really want to see is a series regular. You know, I think that would be so much more powerful statement. Like, you know, we've already seen that in Supergirl. So we've already seen that they've done that with Nicole Maines, you know, as being a series regular on there. And it allows them to really explore a topic, not just like a one-off kind of Saturday afternoon, you know, or after school special like they used to have, you know, back in the day, but like, you know, something where you can really explore topics long-term, like, you know.
I agree.
Love and
I love, look at Wilson's face. Look at Wilson's face.
You're not going to get an argument from me.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to say is, you know, I can't even say that. I'm just going to say.
You're going to say stay tuned.
I'm just going to say season 3 will be out by the end of the year.
Well, I'm already on CBS All Access. I've seen Picard. I've seen all of Discovery.
I agree with you. The entire cast is with you. So are the writers and creators. We are boldly going where no Trek has ever gone before in many, many ways.
Awesome.
Oh, wait, I was just going to say something. Oh, it's gone. Oh, well.
Okay. Wilson, Bridget would like to know, have you ever thought about writing a book?
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Especially after reading this. Yeah, I have. That's all I can. I mean, yes. I would, yeah. I mean, the pressure of it, right? You know, I feel like I think it's a lot, and I would want it. I would want to do it right. I would have to have a long conversation with Jenny Boylan.
I'm interested that no one has asked me if I wouldn't like to be on Star Trek, because it seems to me it's a fair question. The answer is I don't think so. No, because I think Wilson might be able to write a book. I think I could not act. So let's just.
I could work with you. You're a performer.
Oh, okay.
You are a performer.
Wilson, somebody else wants to, Don wants to know. We know that JFB's favorite band is the Grateful Dead. What about you? Do you have a #1 favorite band?
Band?
Don, that's your question.
Yes, it is.
I just knew that was you.
Yeah.
You can answer it too.
My favorite band. I'm trying to think of bands.
Or even a favorite song. What's the first song that pops in your head that makes you happy?
Oh, the first song that makes me happy? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Smile by Charlie Chaplin.
Oh.
What a classic. That's great.
And it's amazing that he wrote that. I mean, it was used, and it just amazes me when
I sing a lot these days as a reminder.
Let me just do a little plug. Melody Maya is also a singer and an actress, available for Star Trek Discovery or anything else. It's on YouTube, Melody Maya. I'm working on becoming her agent. So this is my little plug.
All right.
Thank you.
You heard you have to give her 10%. You heard that.
Wait, 10? Well, I thought it was 15. Okay.
I don't know who we're working with, but they're crooks.
Okay. Well, we'll talk later.
Jenny, do you have a favorite band?
Well, people know I have been a lifelong Deadhead, which is only proof that I'm the biggest failure as a queer icon. That possibly be. Yeah, I've always loved the Grateful Dead, especially the early stuff. I love the long. I love the idea that so many of their, when they're at their best, it's the long thought, the idea of a song that can
I know
morph.
what my favorite band is.
You figured it out?
Yeah, it's so obvious. It's Earth, Wind, and Fire.
There we go.
I don't know
While
what
I've been in, you know, it's funny, while I've been in quarantine, I've really been going back to like the music that I loved when I was like 14.
Yes.
Listening to a lot of Sly and the Family Stone.
Yes.
And
I feel like during quarantine, I have been going back to comfort music, and I've been listening to stuff that I hadn't listened to since I was a teenager.
And then Jenny, the follow-up to this, you used song lyrics for two of your books are named after song lyrics. Was there a song lyric you considered as the title for Good Boy? That was Richard.
You know, yeah, it's funny. I have done that. It's actually 3 books. She's Not There, I'm Looking Through You, and Stuck in the Middle with You. And those 3 books are kind of like a trilogy of my experiences. I think of that as the kind of my gender trilogy. And I was really ready to let that go with Good Boy, because Good Boy is really about something. It's really about something else. In both, I think, in TV and movies, also in books, using music it's a dicey thing, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you can really go to a particular moment in time and a particular feeling to communicate with people who speak that same cultural shorthand with you. But it's also true that if your audience doesn't speak that language or doesn't like that song, you can lose them. And as time goes on, you can really like trap your book in 1974. So I used to use a lot of lyrics. Now I don't use it quite so much. There's also the issue of permissions, which is really expensive. It cost me in 1991. It cost me $500 to use 2 lines of a Beatles song.
While reading this book, there are 2 instances in which your friend Lloyd plays 2 cello pieces, and I was sitting here in my living room, and I decided I would play them while I read those passages. And that Bach cello solo is one of my favorites. So number 1, it was a cello number 1. I can't remember. But it's a great. So if you read the book and those 2 pieces come up, I think it's a good idea.
That's cool. I love that.
Jenny, Alan says that your appearance on the Oprah show was groundbreaking and very impactful. Can you talk about that experience and how it affected you?
Yeah. Well, I have more to say about that than there's really time to share with you, but I can say it was a big freaking deal, certainly for me as a writer, but also for the transgender community as a whole. Until that time, trans people had really been kind of people who you'd have on a talk show in order to kick and ridicule. And I swore I wasn't going to let it happen to me. And also Oprah was determined, fortunately, not to let it happen to me. And so that first show, which I was only supposed to be on for half an hour, and I quickly became 2 days, which was kind of cool. I remember my publicist from Random House was sitting in the audience, and she looked like, like Yosemite Sam when suddenly the eyes turn to cherries and coins start rolling out the mouth. Anyway, it was really cool. I was treated with dignity and respect. And also I was able to kind of push back and frame the narrative in the way that I wanted. And I mean, it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. I had to talk about some things that years later I would have been, I would have had the wherewithal to say, that's private and I'm not going to talk about that. But, the book became a bestseller in one day, thanks Oprah. So what can I do but be grateful for that? It changed my life as a writer. I went from a kind of somewhat obscure mid-list writer to a somewhat less obscure mid-list writer. No, I mean, it made everything possible for me, including what I'm doing now, including this book, including the New York Times column that I'm writing. Speaking of which, there's a column running in tomorrow's Times about the mental health crisis that the COVID quarantine is causing, which is, I think I just want to mention, one, I guess I'm plugging the column. Yeah, okay, I'm doing that. But also, I know a lot of people who are really struggling with anxiety and depression, and you know, it's a thing that people are really not talking about, but we should talk about, because it's one thing to keep yourself safe and to keep yourself healthy, by which I mean not getting a coronavirus. But this is really taking a toll on everyone, and particularly people who suffer from anxiety and depression, and other issues as well. If you feel that you are in trouble, it's okay to reach out and ask for help. And I guess that's all I'll say to that. I know our time here is coming toward an end. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
I have a request before we go, though.
Before we go.
You know, you talk in the book about the fact that you were a great mimic. Are you still a great mimic?
My voice isn't quite as plastic as it used to be, but who do you want to hear?
I was really interested in Marlon Brando imitating Gypsy Rose Lee. I wanted to hear that.
Yeah, I could do Marlon Brando imitating Gypsy Rose Lee. Let me just think for a second. The minute you walk through the door, I could tell you were a great big spender, a man of distinction. Hey, big spender, spend a little dime on me. See, that's not one of my better ones. The good one is like Bob Dylan imitating Richard Nixon. And this is what I called imitation. So like Bob Dylan imitating Dudley Do-Right is like, you know, geez, I've got... Geez, I can't find my knees. Well, anyway, I just lost my chance to be on Star Trek. Just there.
You did not. I loved it. I loved it.
Hey, thanks to Wilson. I'm going to hold up the book cover one more time. Here it is, Good Boy. It's published by Celadon. Available, of course, at Amazon.com, but also if you go to IndieBound, you can purchase the book from your local independent bookseller. Anyway, Good Boy, it's around everywhere, and it is delightful to be here. Thanks to Wilson, and also thanks to the Center in New York City for your life-saving work, which goes on. I'm so grateful to everybody here.
And Jenny, thank you so much for continuing to use your life and your experience to expand our hearts and helping us understand people who aren't like us all that much more.
Thank you both. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Center.
Live long and prosper, everybody. And love. See you later.
Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.